He just put the cup away. He didn't know someone was watching, but the next morning a note appeared at the counter, and 3 days later, the entire shift quit. What had he done wrong? The cup no one touched. He opened the cafe at 5:42, a bit earlier than usual. It was cool and quiet inside. The street lamp outside still cast light through the blinds, drawing stripes across the floor. The barista walked to the counter, turned on the espresso machine, started warming the milk, and checked the syrup levels on the shelf. Familiar motions, learned by heart, almost automatic. When he stepped to the window to pull back the curtain, he noticed it. The cup, gray ceramic, thick rim, a crack around the edge. Not part of their dishes. He knew their inventory by heart, down to every chip. But there it stood, alone, as if someone had just left it behind in farewell. He crouched beside it. The inside was dry, but there was a dark residue along the wall. Coffee stains, as if it had sat there all night, maybe longer. But who had put it there? The doors were locked. The cameras would have caught something. And in this neighborhood, no one just wandered in. Not this area, not this cafe. It was all too ordinary to be mysterious. And yet, there it was. He brought the cup to his face, sniffed it. It smelled like nothing, just ceramic and time. Then, almost on instinct, he pressed his ear to the rim. He'd done that since childhood. His grandfather used to say, if there's silence left inside, someone placed it, didn't lose it. Since then, he always listened. He straightened up, stood for a moment, then took the cup and carried it to the back room, where they kept forgotten things, mittens, gloves, an old baseball cap, and a single tube of lip balm. He set the cup on the shelf, further from the edge. No note, no date. Back at the window, he wiped down the sill carefully, not just the dust, as if wiping away traces. Then he turned on the lights in the room, wiped down the counter, checked the sugar. Everything as always, but the feeling of something foreign didn't go away. The clock read 5:59. At 6:01, the first customer walked in. A man in a hoodie, earbuds in, eyes down. He took an Americano and left. Didn't glance at the windowsill. Didn't look at the barista. And the barista still felt the chill of that cup on his fingers. A faint tremble in his hands, as if he'd touched not a thing, but a presence. He didn't mention it to his coworkers. Just made the next coffee and went on with the shift. But from that morning on, the cafe had already changed. Only he didn't know it yet. The morning started as usual. He arrived by 6, as always, though he hadn't slept well. He dreamed of the cup. In the dream, it tapped on the glass from the inside, silently. He woke up before the alarm. Work went on as normal. Lights, machine, filters, warming the milk. The room smelled faintly of yesterday's syrup. He opened the doors a minute early and took his place at the counter. The first customers were regulars. A man in a gray coat, earbuds in, took his Americano without looking. A woman with a blanket over her shoulders, 2 sugars in her latte. An old man with a cane, who always brought his own mug with "From Crimea with Love" printed on it. No one lingered. Everything followed the script. But he noticed oddities. Some customers paused by the window. Not obviously, just a glance toward the sill, a pause, a frown. One teenager took out his phone and filmed something. A woman in a mask sat by the glass, didn't order anything, just stared in the direction where the cup used to sit. He felt drawn there too, as if the place still held the void. He remembered the exact position of the cup, the beam of light from the street lamp, the scratch in the paint underneath. Now it was spotless, and that unsettled him, like the emptiness was trying too hard to look tidy. At 7:26, a woman came in whom he didn't know. Plaid coat, thick-rimmed glasses, scarf carelessly looped. She stared at the menu for a while, then looked at him and said in a strangely quiet voice, "You moved it." He froze, didn't manage to ask what she meant. She had already turned to leave, didn't order coffee, but left behind a feeling of something left unsaid, like residue at the bottom of a cup. He stood still for a few more seconds, then continued working, but slower, more attentively, as if any action could disturb something again. By the end of the shift, he noticed that no one sat by the window, not a single customer. The chairs there remained empty, even though the rest of the cafe was full. When he locked the doors that night, he walked to the windowsill and laid a napkin there, just like that. No words, no reason, and left without looking back. The night was restless. For the first time in a while, he couldn't fall asleep right away. He lay in the dark, listening to the silence of his apartment, staring at the silhouette of his kitchen cup on the windowsill. Not that cup, an ordinary one, but now every cup seemed like more than just an object. In his dream, there was a noise, dull, like dripping behind a wall, and the same windowsill, only in an old house with peeling paint. He stood by the window, and the cup on it trembled, as if something beneath it was humming. That morning he arrived a little later than usual. No one was at the door. His coworker was running late, so he had to open the cafe alone. First thing he did was head to the storage room for the cup, but it was gone. The shelf where he'd left it was empty. The mittens and old baseball cap were still there. The jacket, too. But the gray cup with the crack was nowhere to be found. Not on the floor, not among the dishes, not even in the trash. He checked everything. When the other barista finally arrived, he asked if she had touched anything on the top shelf. She shrugged. She didn't bother climbing up there, too lazy to even grab a stool. Her voice held no deception. She truly didn't care about other people's stuff. He tried to check the camera footage, but the storage room corner was a dead zone. None of the angles covered it. The only thing visible was him entering in the morning and taking out the trash. He hadn't touched the cup. He returned to the window. Once again, his eyes were pulled toward the sill, as if something was still there, not visible, but present. On the pale paint, he noticed a faint scratch, a barely there line, like from a fingernail or a key, and a small spot, a dried dot of coffee that hadn't been wiped. He was sure he'd cleaned the surface thoroughly. He touched it with his finger. In that instant, a girl with coffee walked past, paused, looked at him, and turned away, as if she'd caught him doing something private. That strange tension returned, as if someone was watching him, or as if he had trespassed into someone's silent space. It wasn't the cup that had vanished. It was the boundary between him and something that had once been invisible. He went back to the counter, worked in silence all day, like someone on display. And all day he felt like something was observing him, not with eyes, not with a body, just attention. That evening, he came home later than usual, took off his jacket, turned on the kitchen light, and froze. On the windowsill stood the gray cup. That one. He recognized it by the crack and the shape of the handle. It stood there as if it had always been there. But he knew for certain he hadn't brought it home. The morning began, just like the last one, with a strange sense of waiting. He hadn't slept well again. No nightmares. Just a body that refused to rest. Inside, everything remained slightly tense, as if his system was awaiting a signal it couldn't decode. He arrived a bit early and went straight to the back room, just in case. The cup was still gone. The shelf was bare. No marks, no dust. Nothing to show it had ever been there. When he returned to the counter, something odd caught his eye. A piece of paper, folded in half and wedged between the espresso machine and a box of straws. Not printed, not from a notepad. Old, yellowed, with torn edges. Handwritten. He unfolded it. The handwriting was nervous, slanted, thin. Just one sentence. It was a place, not a thing. You misunderstood. He read it 3 times, then slowly folded it and slipped it into his pocket. He didn't show anyone, not out of fear. He just didn't know how to explain it, or to whom. His evening shift coworker probably wouldn't have noticed it anyway. The entire day passed in a hushed stillness. Customers came, but fewer than usual. Some lingered near the window but didn't sit. An older man stood outside for a long time, staring through the glass, then turned and left without coming in. The barista felt the change in people's behavior. Not like before. There was something shared in their eyes, a subtle mistrust, or perhaps the opposite, an intense awareness, as if they knew something he didn't. At some point, he walked over to the window again. The sill was clean, but on the glass, a faint smudge of a hand, a human palm, pressed from the inside. He wiped it with his finger. The mark vanished, but not in his mind. He returned to the counter, made himself a coffee, for the first time in a long while. No sugar, no milk. Drank it slowly, staring at one spot. The note burned in his pocket. He didn't know who had left it, but he was sure of one thing. This wasn't a coincidence. This was meant for him. The cafe no longer felt like his. He moved through it like a guest in someone else's apartment, where everything was in place but the air didn't breathe with you. On the 4th morning, he came to the cafe earlier than usual, at 5:30. The silence felt denser than before, as if the building itself was holding its breath. He didn't turn on the music, didn't even crack the window open. Just walked slowly through the room, checking every chair, every spoon, as if searching for something he might have missed. By 6, the doors were unlocked, but no one came. 6:10, 6:15, not a single customer, not a single colleague. He typed into the work chat, "Where is everyone?" No response, just one gray check mark. By 6:30, he realized, today he was alone. Almost without thinking, he taped a note to the door, temporarily operating on reduced hours, and wrote 7 a.m. as the opening time, though he didn't leave. He just stayed inside, not waiting on the threshold. He made himself a coffee, then poured a second one, no sugar, no lid, and placed it on the windowsill. Didn't drink it, just left it there. And that's when the door opened. She entered almost without a sound. The same woman who had once said, "You moved it." This time, no scarf. Her hair was pulled back. Her hands trembled, not from cold. In her hand, another cup, milky white, with a blue bird painted on the side, worn but carefully held. She walked straight to the windowsill and placed the cup exactly where the first one had stood. No words, not even a glance in his direction, then turned and left, without waiting for coffee. He didn't touch the cup, didn't even approach it. He just froze behind the counter, watching. About 10 minutes later, an elderly man came in, sat at a table in the corner, ordered nothing. Then a girl with a laptop, no charger, quietly took a seat. One by one, people started entering. Not like customers, more like on cue, and not a single one spoke. One brought a blanket and draped it over a chair. Another placed an open book at the edge of a table, as if saving it for someone. The barista stood motionless, watching the cafe fill, not with noise, but with presence. He understood they weren't here for coffee. The windowsill was no longer empty, but it wasn't occupied either. It had become something else, a space someone had quietly returned to its purpose, without explanations, without demands. He didn't know how long it would last, but he knew one thing. Today, he was no longer the one in charge of this cafe. He began arriving earlier, not because he had to, simply because he couldn't not. The door stayed open longer than posted. The schedule began to blur, but no one complained. Customers still came, almost on the hour, almost without speaking. One man entered at 9:03 and stood at the counter without placing an order. Just stood there, eyes down. He looked exhausted, like he'd walked all night. He wore a white shirt and a light jacket. The barista was about to ask something, but the man handed him a card first. Latte, no foam. His voice was steady, but something in it wavered. Not pain, not anger. More like tension, as if this order was his last link to the world he used to know. The barista made the latte, a little stronger than usual. The man took the cup, nodded, and left without sipping. Later, the phone rang. An unlisted number. The voice was polite but dry. You're no longer operating on standard hours. We need confirmation. Are you officially open? He paused for a moment and answered simply, number, but the door's open. The line went dead. He told no one about the call. He simply removed the sign with the operating hours and never put another one up. A notebook appeared beneath the counter, one he kept for himself now. Lists, no timestamps. 12:47, mug with lettering. 13:32, postcard with a rose. One day someone left a black and white photograph. An old building, this cafe, but different. Above the door, a sign that read memory. No name, no date. He didn't take the photo, just turned it face down and left it on the counter. 14:01, empty cup with sugar inside. 14:38, book with no cover. He didn't know why he recorded these things. It just felt like if he didn't, they'd disappear. Or maybe they never existed at all. But if he wrote them down, they'd stay, at least in the notebook. Some people returned, some didn't. Some looked at the windowsill with gratitude, others with blame. Some simply approached, checking if the cup still stood where it should. He didn't ask questions, didn't stop anyone. He just placed a napkin nearby and left space. He didn't count the days, didn't mark dates. At some point it became clear whatever needed to happen was already happening. People kept coming, not like before, not in crowds, but with purpose. Someone brought their own mug. Someone else placed a cup down and left without even ordering coffee. He stopped asking questions, just watched. He developed a new habit, a subtle tilt of the head, just barely, as if listening not to words but to intent. When the second note appeared, he didn't open it right away. He waited until evening. It held only 3 words. Still here, somehow. He understood. It wasn't about a person. He understood. No reply was needed. Then came another one, folded in 2, laid beside a cup with a sip of tea left inside. On the napkin, a ring-shaped imprint, almost a full circle, and beneath it, keep it. He didn't wipe it, just took the cup, washed it, and returned it to the windowsill, exactly where it had been. He already knew some things aren't meant to be taken. They're meant to be left, exactly where they were. He brought the cup close to his face, inhaled, then almost by instinct, pressed his ear to the rim. He'd done it since childhood. His grandfather used to say, if there's silence inside, someone left it. They didn't lose it. Since then, he always listened. He left it right there, then removed the saucer and slipped the note into the notebook between 2 pages. The next morning, he noticed something on the sill, his own cup, the one from his kitchen. He hadn't brought it with him, but there it was, turned outward, empty,